Part 1. The Silence Before the Storm. The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across 17 solar systems. They were a young species among the stars. The Galactic Concord was a union of 43 elder races who had maintained peace for over 12,000 years. These ancient civilizations looked at humans the way adults look at noisy children. They tolerated them, but they never respected them. Humans lived too fast and died too young. They felt too much and thought too little. That was what the elder races believed. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the United Earth Navy vessel Relentless and stared at the message on his screen. A distress signal had come from the frontier colony of New Montana. The signal had cut off mid-transmission. The last sound was a scream. Daniel was a tall man with gray eyes and a calm face that hid a sharp mind. He had served in the Navy for 20 years and he had seen many things, but something about this signal made his stomach turn cold. The Relentless jumped through folded space and arrived at New Montana in 3 hours. Daniel expected to find damage. He expected to find survivors calling for help. He expected to find something. He found nothing. The colony was gone, not destroyed, not burning, just gone. The buildings stood empty like shells. The streets were covered in gray ash that drifted in the wind. 18,000 people had lived here, families, children, workers, and dreamers. Now there was only silence. Lieutenant Price was the ship's chief science officer. She was a small woman with dark hair and quick hands that moved across her instruments like a musician playing an instrument. She scanned the colony for hours, and her face grew more troubled with each reading. "There are energy signatures here that I have never seen before," she told Daniel. "They are not in any Concord database. These patterns are ancient. They are older than any of the elder races. We are talking millions of years." Daniel felt the cold in his stomach spread to his chest. He ordered the crew to collect samples and record everything. Then he sent a report to Admiral Cole at Earth Command. The response came 2 days later. Admiral Cole was a political man who cared more about his position than his people. His message was short and dismissive. He told Daniel that frontier colonies faced many dangers. Accidents happened. The matter was closed. Daniel did not accept this answer. He contacted the Concord Council directly through official channels. Ambassador of the species responded on behalf of the council. They were one of the oldest races in the galaxy. They had blue skin and eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. Spoke with the patience of someone explaining simple things to a slow student. "Commander Hayes," the ambassador said, "we understand your concern, but the frontier is dangerous. Your species chose to expand quickly despite our warnings. You must accept your losses with dignity. Do not make noise about matters you do not understand." The transmission ended. Daniel sat alone in his quarters and thought about 18,000 people who had been erased from existence. He thought about the word dignity, and he felt something hot replace the cold in his chest. It was anger. Came to him that night with new information. She had been searching through restricted databases using access codes she should not have had. She found records of 3 other human colonies that had gone silent in the past year. Each time the official report blamed accidents or equipment failures. Each time the investigation was closed within days. "Someone is hiding something," said both Earth Command and the Concord. Daniel gathered a small crew of officers he trusted completely. Brooks was his tactical officer. He was a quiet man with steady hands who never missed a shot and never lost his nerve. Was the chief engineer. He was loud where was quiet, but he could make a ship do things its designers never intended. Together, they began their own investigation. They worked in secret during off-duty hours. They followed data trails that others had tried to erase. They found connections that pointed toward a sector of space called the Ashen Reach. The Ashen Reach had been declared off-limits by the Concord for 10,000 years. No explanation had ever been given. Automated defense platforms destroyed any ship that entered. Even the elder races avoided speaking about it. What happened there 10,000 years ago? Daniel wondered aloud during one of their late-night meetings. Had been working on decrypting the original distress signal from New Montana. Most of it was corrupted beyond recovery, but she had managed to pull one fragment from the noise. She played it for them and the room went silent. A voice, a human voice filled with terror. One word came through clearly before the transmission died. "Run." Leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Run from what?" he asked. No one had an answer, but Daniel made a decision in that moment. He would find out what had killed his people. He would find out what the conquered was hiding, and he would make sure that humanity never had to run from anything again. The Relentless continued its patrol along the frontier as if nothing had changed. But below the surface, a small group of humans had begun to pull at threads that powerful beings had worked very hard to bury. They did not know yet what they would find. They did not know that the truth would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. They only knew that something was very wrong, and humanity deserved to know what it was. In the dark spaces between stars, something ancient stirred in its long sleep. It had been dreaming for 10,000 years, but now it sensed something new. Bright little lights had appeared on the edge of its awareness, warm little minds that tasted like fear and hope and stubborn defiance. It had been so long since it had fed. The stars continued to burn in their ancient patterns. Ships traveled their routes. Colonies lived their lives, and no one except a handful of humans on a single Navy vessel knew that everything was about to change. The silence before the storm is always the most peaceful. It is also the most dangerous, because in that silence the storm gathers its strength, and when it finally breaks it sweeps away everything that was not prepared. Humanity was not prepared, but humanity had never been good at accepting limits. That stubbornness had carried them from caves to stars in a heartbeat of cosmic time. Now it would carry them into a war that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The silence held for a little while longer, but it would not hold forever. Nothing does. Part 2, Whispers of the Forgotten. Daniel spent 3 months following dead ends and false trails. Every time he got close to answers, someone blocked his path. Files disappeared. Witnesses refused to speak. Orders came from Earth Command to focus on his patrol duties and stop asking questions. But Daniel had never been good at following orders that did not make sense. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A scholar named contacted the Relentless through a hidden channel. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived species. His blue skin had faded to pale gray and his many eyes were clouded with age. But his mind was still sharp and his conscience still troubled him. "I have carried this secret for 200 years, told Daniel through the encrypted link. I cannot carry it to my grave. Your species deserves to know why you are dying." They met in person on a neutral station far from conquered space, moved slowly and spoke carefully. He told Daniel a story that changed everything. 10,000 years ago the galaxy was different. There were more species then. 17 great civilizations flourished in what is now empty space. They built wonders that modern races cannot imagine. They thought they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. Something came from the space between galaxies. The elder races called it the Hollow because that is what it left behind. Hollow worlds, hollow stars, hollow space where life had once existed. It was not a creature in any sense that made sense to mortal minds. It was old when the universe was young. It fed on life itself, not bodies, not energy, life, the essence that separates the living from the dead. The Hollow consumed those 17 civilizations in less than a century. Trillions of beings were reduced to ash and silence. The remaining races banded together in desperation. They built a weapon using knowledge gathered from 100 worlds. The weapon required power that no reactor could provide. It was fueled by the life force of billions of volunteers who gave themselves willingly so that others might survive. The weapon worked. It wounded the Hollow and drove it into dormancy. The creature retreated to the space that is now called the Ashen Reach. The Conquered was formed to stand guard and ensure it never woke again. For 10,000 years they succeeded. "But the weapon can never be used again," said. His old eyes were wet with something that might have been tears. "There are not enough willing sacrifices left among the elder races. We have grown comfortable. We have forgotten how to give ourselves for others. When the Hollow wakes, we will have nothing to fight it with." Daniel felt ice in his veins. When it wakes, he repeated, "Not if." Lowered his head. "It has already begun to stir. The Conquered has known for decades. We have been preparing." "Preparing how?" Daniel demanded. The old could not meet his eyes. "We have been withdrawing, pulling our colonies back from the frontier, creating distance between ourselves and the Ashen Reach. Your species arrived at the perfect time for us. You spread so quickly. You built colonies in all the places we abandoned. Bright little settlements full of noisy little minds." The truth hit Daniel like a physical blow. "You used us as bait." Said nothing. His silence was confession enough. Daniel returned to the Relentless with fire in his heart. He called his crew together and told them everything, wept with rage, sat in cold silence, swore in languages that Daniel did not recognize. They had to tell humanity, but how could they make people believe something so terrible? The answer came from an unlikely ally. Cole was Admiral Cole's daughter. She was a journalist who had built her career on exposing uncomfortable truths. She had heard rumors about her father's involvement in a cover-up, and she had been investigating on her own. When Daniel contacted her, she already had pieces of the puzzle. Together, they completed the picture. Published the story across every human network simultaneously. She had evidence. She had testimony. She had the classified files that had stolen from conquered databases. The story spread like fire across dry grass. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fury erupted on every human world. Protests filled the streets of Earth. Colonial governors demanded answers. Military officers refused orders from superiors they no longer trusted. Humanity had been used as bait. Humanity had been fed to something ancient and terrible while the elder races ran away. This was not something humans could accept quietly. Ambassador contacted Earth Command with an offer. His blue face was calm on the screen as he spoke words that should have shamed him. He proposed that humanity submit peacefully. The remaining human colonies would serve as feeding grounds to satisfy the Hollow's hunger. In exchange, Earth itself would be spared long enough for a small population to be evacuated to safety. He spoke as if he was being generous. He spoke as if humanity should be grateful for the chance to sacrifice most of its people so that a few might survive as refugees. President gave her response in a broadcast that reached every corner of human space. She was a small woman with white hair and a spine made of steel. She had grown up on a mining colony and worked her way to the highest office through decades of service. She spoke simply and clearly. The conquered asks us to abandon our colonies. They ask us to let our children be devoured so that their children might live a little longer. They ask us to accept our role as prey and thank them for the privilege. She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every human who was watching. We are humanity. We crawled out of caves and reached for stars. We have never accepted the limits others placed on us. We do not abandon our own. We do not run. And we do not forgive those who use us as shields while they flee. Her voice hardened into something that sounded like thunder. To the conquered I say this. You have made your choice. Now we will make ours. Humanity goes to war, not for conquest, not for glory, for survival, for justice, and for every soul you fed to the darkness while telling us it was an accident. The transmission ended. Across 17 solar systems, humans looked at each other and saw something new in familiar faces. They saw determination. They saw anger. They saw the stubborn refusal to accept what could not be accepted. The elder races had lived for thousands of years by being careful, by avoiding risks, by sacrificing others to protect themselves. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for something worth dying for. Humanity was about to remind them. Part 3: The Gathering of the Defiant. Humanity mobilized for war on a scale that had never been seen before. Every shipyard across 17 systems operated at maximum capacity. Factories that had made consumer goods switched to producing weapons and armor. Mines that had supplied building materials now fed the hungry forges of warships. Civilians volunteered by the millions. Old veterans came out of retirement. Young people who had never held a weapon lined up at recruitment centers. Scientists abandoned their research projects to focus on one question: how do you kill something that has lived for 1 billion years? Daniel Hayes was promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the newly formed Vanguard Fleet. It was humanity's first dedicated wartime armada. 300 vessels of every size and configuration. Battleships and cruisers and destroyers and carriers. Each one crewed by humans who knew they might not come home. Each one armed with the best weapons Earth could build. Daniel's crew from the Relentless became his command staff. Price led the research division. She worked with teams of scientists from every colony searching for any weakness in the Hollow. Brooks coordinated tactics across the fleet. He ran simulations day and night trying to find strategies that might work against an enemy that comprehension. Oversaw the rapid development of new weapons technology. He pushed his engineers beyond their limits and then pushed them further. But weapons meant nothing without knowledge. They needed to understand what they were fighting. The old records were incomplete. The conquered had deliberately destroyed most information about the Hollow to prevent panic. What remained was scattered across ancient archives on abandoned worlds. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. On the colony world of a young engineer named Perry was exploring ruins that predated the Concord itself. She was not part of any official research team. She was simply curious. That curiosity changed the course of the war. Found a sealed chamber deep beneath the ruins. Inside was a partial schematic for the original weapon that had wounded the Hollow 10,000 years ago. But more importantly, she found notes from the scientists who had built it. Notes that suggested an alternative power source, one that did not require sacrifice. She transmitted her findings to the Vanguard fleet immediately, assembled her best minds to study the data. What they discovered was extraordinary. The key was resonance. Every sentient mind produces a unique frequency. It is the hum of consciousness itself, the vibration of awareness rippling through dimensions that normal instruments cannot detect. The elder races had learned long ago to suppress this frequency. They believed it drew the attention of predatory entities from the void. They had become quiet, hidden, still. Humans had never learned this technique. No one had taught them. The Conquered had kept them ignorant deliberately. Human minds burned bright across the cosmos like beacons in endless night. They were loud in a galaxy of whispers. This was why the Hollow had targeted human colonies first. It could sense them. It was drawn to them like a predator drawn to wounded prey. This was why the Conquered had never taught humanity to hide. They needed bait that would shine. But saw something in the ancient notes that the Conquered had missed. The frequency could be weaponized. Instead of hiding humanity's mental signature, it could be amplified and focused into a directed pulse. The brighter the mind, the more dangerous it became. What the Hollow fed upon could also hurt it. Light could burn as well as illuminate. Humanity did not need to sacrifice itself. Humanity needed to scream. Worked with and to build a prototype. It was a device that could connect to human minds and amplify their combined frequency into a coherent beam. The theory was sound. The engineering was possible, but the scale required was beyond anything they had attempted before. One mind was not enough. 100 minds were not enough. They needed millions. They needed billions. They needed every human being across every colony thinking the same thought at the same moment. They needed to turn the entire species into a weapon. "It sounds impossible," said when they presented the plan to the command staff. "It is impossible," agreed. "That is why it might work. The Hollow has never encountered anything like this. It expects prey that hides and runs. It does not expect prey that stands together and fights back." Daniel studied the schematics and the calculations. He saw the risks. He saw the unknowns. He saw the 1,000 ways it could fail. But he also saw something else. He saw hope. "Build it," he ordered. "Build it and connect it to every human settlement in existence. When the time comes, we will show this ancient thing what humanity is made of." The construction began immediately. Relay stations were built on every colony. Neural interfaces were distributed to every willing volunteer. The network grew day by day, connecting minds across the vast distances of space. It was the largest engineering project in human history, completed in a fraction of the time it should have taken. Because humanity was running out of time. Reports came from the frontier. Strange lights in the Ashen Reach. Energy readings that made no sense. The automated defense platforms were going silent one by one. Something was moving in the forbidden space. Something was waking up. Worked without sleep. She refined the amplifier design again and again. She ran tests on small groups and measured the results. Each time the pulse grew stronger. Each time the frequency became more focused. But she knew it would not be enough unless everyone participated, unless humanity chose to stand as one. She recorded a message that was broadcast across all colonies. Her face was tired, but her eyes were bright with fierce hope. "I am asking you to trust me," she said. "When the moment comes, I am asking you to open your minds and think one thought with all your strength. It does not matter what thought, joy or anger or love or defiance. What matters is that we think it together. What matters is that we are loud." She paused and smiled despite her exhaustion. "They called us primitive. They called us noisy. They called us too emotional for our own good. Let us show them what human emotion can do when 8 billion hearts beat as one." The message spread. People talked about it in homes and workplaces. Children asked their parents what they should think about when the time came. Strangers discussed it on public transport. The idea took root in the human spirit and grew into something powerful. Humanity had always been divided by borders and beliefs. Now they found something that united them, a common enemy, a common purpose, a chance to prove that the things that made them different from the elder races were not weaknesses but strengths. The Hollow was coming, but humanity would be ready, not with the cold calculations of ancient civilizations, not with the quiet acceptance of inevitable defeat, but with the full force of human stubbornness and human passion and human refusal to go gently into any darkness. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity stopped hiding and started fighting back. Part 4: The Day the Stars Trembled. The Hollow emerged from the Ashen Reach on a morning that would be remembered forever. It came as a darkness that swallowed light itself. Sensors across the frontier detected something that description: a shadow larger than worlds, a hunger older than stars, an absence where existence should have been. It stretched across light years as it moved. Where it passed, stars dimmed as if their fire was being drained, worlds withered and cracked. The fabric of space itself seemed to shudder in its presence. It was not alive in any way that made sense. It simply was, and it was hungry. The conquered fleets scattered like leaves before a hurricane. Ships that had maintained order for 10,000 years fled in every direction. Their courage had been spent long ago. They had nothing left but fear. Ambassador broadcast a final message as his vessel tried to escape. His blue face was twisted with terror. He begged for forgiveness. He said he had only been following the decisions of those who came before him. He said he was sorry. The darkness touched his ship and was gone. His apology echoed through empty space, and no one was listening. Humanity stood alone. Admiral Daniel Hayes led the Vanguard fleet into position around the colony world of Haven. It was the last barrier before Earth. 300 vessels formed a defensive line across the darkness. Behind them, evacuation ships carried civilians toward the inner systems, millions of people fleeing to buy time for the fight that was coming. Daniel stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the sensors. The Hollow was approaching. It moved slowly because it had no need to hurry. It had waited 10,000 years. It could wait a little longer to savor its meal. "All ships prepare for engagement," Daniel ordered. His voice was calm even though his heart was racing. "Today we find out if humans can kill a god." The battle began with fire. Human weapons lit up the darkness with every color of destruction that science could create. Missiles and energy beams and kinetic rounds and experimental devices that had never been tested in combat. The Vanguard fleet threw everything it had at the Hollow. And the Hollow bled. It was not supposed to be possible. The ancient records said the creature was beyond harm, but human weapons bit into its darkness and left wounds that glowed with strange light. The Hollow felt pain. After a billion years of feeding without consequence, it discovered that its prey had teeth. But the creature was vast beyond imagination. Wounds that would have destroyed fleets closed almost instantly. For every injury the humans inflicted, the Hollow simply grew around it, and it kept coming. Ships began to fall. The destroyer Furious was the first. It vanished into the darkness and was gone. Then the cruiser Defiance. Then a dozen more. Brave crews fighting to the last moment. Bright minds winking out one by one. Daniel watched his fleet dying and knew that weapons alone would not be enough. They had hurt the Hollow. They had proven it could feel pain, but they could not kill it. Not like this. On the surface of Haven, Perry stood before the resonance amplifier. It was a towering device that hummed with power. Cables spread from it like veins connecting to relay stations across the planet. Those stations connected to networks that spanned every human colony in existence. 8 billion minds waiting for the signal. Was beside her. She had come down from the fleet to oversee the technical systems. She looked at the readings and felt a cold weight in her stomach. The power requirements are beyond anything we tested. The feedback could burn out every mind connected to the network. It could kill everyone. Did not look away from her controls. I know. There has to be another way. We need more time to refine the calibrations. Finally turned to face her friend. Saw something in her eyes that was beyond fear. It was acceptance. There is no more time. The fleet is dying. If we do not act now, there will be no one left to save. She took hands in her own. Tell Daniel I am sorry I could not be there to see what comes next. Tell him to build something worth protecting. Before could respond, activated the amplifier. The signal went out across all frequencies. It touched every relay station on every colony. It reached into the minds of 8 billion human beings and asked them one simple question. Will you stand with us? The response was overwhelming. Across 17 solar systems, people stopped what they were doing. They closed their eyes. They reached out with their minds towards something they could barely understand. Parents held their children. Lovers held each other. Strangers took the hands of strangers. And they thought. They thought of love and loss. They thought of anger and hope. They thought of everyone they had ever cared about and everything they had ever believed in. They thought of survival and defiance and stubborn refusal to accept the unacceptable, and took all of those thoughts and focused them into a single point. For one impossible moment, every human being in existence thought the same thought at the same time. It was not words. It was something deeper than language. It was a declaration that echoed across dimensions. We are here, we are not afraid, and we will not be silent. The pulse struck the hollow like a physical force. A beam of pure human consciousness slammed into the ancient darkness, and for the first time in its billion-year existence, the creature that had devoured civilizations knew fear. It screamed. The sound was not heard with ears. It was felt in bones and minds and souls. It shattered sensors across the galaxy. It cracked the hulls of ships that were light years away. It was the sound of something impossibly old and impossibly powerful encountering something it had never expected. Pain, real pain, the kind that could not be ignored or healed or forgotten. The hollow recoiled. Its vast darkness contracted and shuddered. The wounds that human weapons had inflicted suddenly blazed with light that did not fade. The creature that had never retreated from anything began to pull back. Daniel watched from his bridge as the impossible happened. The darkness was withdrawing. The hollow was running away. On the surface of Haven, the amplifier, overloaded, stood at its heart as power beyond measure flowed through her mind. She had known this would happen. She had known the cost. Her last thought was not fear. It was satisfaction. She had given humanity a future. The light took her and she was gone. Screamed her name, but there was no answer. There was only silence and the fading glow of the amplifier, and a war that humanity had somehow survived. The hollow fled to the edge of the galaxy. It lurked there in the cold spaces between stars, wounded, afraid, watching the bright little minds that had hurt it so badly. It did not advance. It did not feed. For the first time in its existence, it hesitated. The stars trembled in the aftermath of something unprecedented. A young species had faced an ancient god, and the god had blinked first. Part 5. The reason the stars quake. The galaxy was silent in the days that followed the battle. Ships drifted in the void where the hollow had passed. Colonies that had prepared for death found themselves still alive. People who had said goodbye to loved ones held them again with trembling hands. It did not feel real. Survival never does when you have accepted the end. The hollow lingered at the edge of known space. It did not approach. It did not feed. It simply watched from the darkness between galaxies, wounded and wary and afraid of the bright little minds that had hurt it so badly. Admiral Daniel Hayes brought the survivors of his fleet home to Haven. Of 300 vessels, only 87 remained. Thousands of crew members had been lost, but they had achieved what 10,000 years of conquered caution had failed to do. They had driven back the darkness. Daniel walked through the ruins of the resonance amplifier and found the place where had stood. There was nothing left of her, not even ash. She had burned too brightly to leave anything behind. He stood there for a long time and did not speak. There were no words for what she had given. Built a memorial on that spot, a simple stone with simple words carved into it. She screamed so we could live. People came from across the colonies to see it. They left flowers and letters and small tokens of gratitude. It became a place of pilgrimage for a species that had learned the true cost of survival. The Galactic Concord collapsed in the weeks that followed. The elder races scattered to their home systems in shame and fear. They had abandoned their duty. They had used younger species as shields. They had run while others fought and died. Their ancient alliances crumbled like old paper in the rain. Many of them sent envoys to Earth. Ships arrived carrying ambassadors who had once dismissed humanity as primitive savages. They came with gifts and apologies and desperate pleas for protection. The species they had looked down upon were now the only force in the galaxy that could hold back the darkness. President received them with cold courtesy. She listened to their words and accepted their tribute, but she made no promises and offered no comfort. Trust once broken is not easily repaired. The elder races would have to earn their place in the new order that humanity was building. Daniel was appointed fleet commander of the newly formed Terran Alliance. It was a coalition of species who pledged themselves to human leadership. Some joined out of gratitude, some joined out of fear, some joined because they had nowhere else to go, but they all accepted that humanity had proven something that could not be. The loud and emotional and short-lived species that everyone had dismissed was now the strongest force in known space. Price became the head of the Academy of Resonance Studies. She trained humans to understand and control their mental frequencies. The gift that had nearly cost them everything could be refined and focused. New generations learned to use their minds as weapons and shields. They would never be caught unprepared again. Brooks took command of the border patrols that watched the dark spaces between stars. His ships were always watching, always ready. The Hollow had not left. It had not died. It was only waiting, and intended to make sure it waited forever. Designed a new generation of vessels built around resonance technology, ships that could amplify the thoughts of their crews into defensive barriers, ships that could strike at the Hollow if it ever approached again. He worked without rest because he knew that peace was temporary. The war was not over. It was only paused. Earth changed in the years that followed. The old divisions between nations faded into memory. There were no more borders. There was only humanity, one species, one purpose, one voice that had learned to sing together. President gave her final broadcast before retirement. She was older now. Her white hair had thinned, and her face showed the weight of all she had carried. But her eyes still held the fire that had humanity in its darkest hour. She spoke of the years ahead. She spoke of the work still to be done. The Hollow existed somewhere in the darkness. Other threats lurked in the void. The universe was vast and old and full of dangers that humanity could not yet imagine. But we will face them, she said, not as scattered colonies fighting alone, not as prey hopping to escape notice, but as humanity together, loud, unafraid. She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had seen the worst and chosen to hope anyway. The elder races kept us in ignorance because they feared what we might become. They suppressed our potential because it frightened them. They thought our emotions were weakness. They thought our short lives made us reckless. They thought our noise would draw predators from the dark. Her voice softened but did not weaken. They were right. Our minds shine across the cosmos. We cannot hide what we are, but they were wrong about what that means. We are not bait. We are not prey. We are the light that the darkness fears. She leaned forward as if speaking directly to every human heart that was listening. The Hollow has lived for 1 billion years. It has consumed civilizations beyond counting. It thought it understood all the ways that life could exist, but it had never encountered minds like ours, minds that burn with passion and rage and hope and love, minds that refuse to be quiet even when silence would be safer. She stood taller despite her age. The galaxy knows now. They know the truth that the conquered tried to hide, the reason they kept us isolated, the reason they feared us even as they used us. When humanity focuses its will, when 8 billion voices cry out as one, when we channel everything, we are into a single moment of absolute defiance. She paused, and the silence stretched across the stars. The universe itself trembles, not because we go to war, but because we refuse to be silent. We refuse to hide. We refuse to accept that anything is too powerful to fight. Her final words rang with the weight of everything humanity had endured and everything they had become. The stars quake because humanity learned to scream, and the darkness has learned to listen. She stepped back from the screen and the broadcast ended. Across 17 solar systems and countless watching vessels, humans sat in silence. They thought about what they had survived. They thought about what they had lost. They thought about what they had become. Perry had given her life so they could learn a simple truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was not a mistake of evolution that the elder races had to tolerate. Humanity was a fire that burned in the darkness, a voice that would not be silenced, a stubborn refusal to accept limits that others tried to impose. And now the galaxy knew, the Hollow knew, everything that lurked in the spaces between stars knew. When humanity went to war, the consequences echoed across dimensions. When humanity stood together, the fabric of reality itself took notice. The stars quake, and humanity was just getting started.